Hey, this is Danielle, and I'm the VP of Options at Simpler Trading. Welcome to today's episode of Your Daily Five. This week has been pretty crazy because we had an earnings report from Nvidia that has just sent the market skyrocketing. When you look at what the NASDAQ has done this week, I mean, certainly it had a lot to do with Nvidia because you can see that the QQQs were actually pulling back below the 21 EMA, and then earnings came out from Nvidia, and boom, up we go. Now, if we look at where we could go from here, Nvidia has continued higher post earnings, and we have some Fibonacci extension targets up here at the 1272 and the 1618. That would bring us up into about 440 and then 450. So I do think that the NASDAQ and the Qs specifically are on a good trajectory. And I think that we can continue higher a little bit longer, but it is also going to depend on a couple key players here. So, what are the most important charts to look at? Well, obviously, Nvidia. Nvidia has been a major reason for this rally. You can see the way that Nvidia was pulling back into this earnings report. We had earnings and then kaboom, explosion up into 800. Typically, when we have a move like this and a stock gaps up 1.5 times what was expected over earnings and it continues, you're generally going to get around 5 days of upside action. So, with the move into 800 today, we actually traded a little bit higher up into about 820. I think that it is possible that we continue on higher into 850 next week. Now, with this in particular, today is an options expiration Friday, so it's pretty typical for a stock to get sticky around a key psychological value. And in this case, that key psychological value is around 800. So with NVIDIA, the thing that I'm going to be looking for is, you just want to focus on the lower time frame charts, like a 15-minute chart, 30-minute chart. And ideally, what we could see next week would be a gap higher. So if we get a gap higher that actually continues onward and upwards instead of a gap higher that breaks down, that would be a sign, and the sign you'd be looking for to say, you know what, I think the Qs have one more leg higher. Another chart that I wanted to point out that I think has a little bit more room to the upside is going to be Microsoft. Now, Microsoft has one of my favorite setups. Microsoft actually has a daily squeeze setup, and this is something that you can see in stock charts. This is called the TTM squeeze. This is a free tool. If you look at the last squeeze, and what's the squeeze, you may ask? It's when you see the series of green shift into red. We have a bunch of red dots right here. What this means is that the stock is consolidating and it's getting ready to break out. That breakout generally happens in the direction of the trend. This last breakout in Microsoft saw the stock trade from around 365 up into about 410. So right now, with stock charts, you can see that you have another daily squeeze setting up. So if this one breaks out, and by the way, it has already started breaking out, where could it go? My Fibonacci targets are going to lead me up into about 425 and then 430. So I think that, Microsoft and NVIDIA, these are, Microsoft has definitely been grouped in with an AI name. It's been grouped in with NVIDIA. You can see the way that it gapped up post earnings. So I like that quite a bit for some upside continuation going into next week. It's definitely a strong relative strength stock, and I think there's a lot of trading possibility with this name. It's also one of my top portfolio holdings. Now, what about some other tickers? There's some other relative weakness tickers in this space. What are those? Well, if you look at Apple, for example, Apple's really not playing along with the whole AI story, right? And so we've seen something happen with Apple where Apple's just continuing to break down. Right about here was where the trend shifted. It's just going to be back in January. It tried to correct going into this earnings report, but just wasn't able to. And at this point, we're underneath a lot of key areas of resistance. And now today, we're down 1%. And that's on a day where, market's been making a new high. So That's not looking very good for Apple. One might say, okay, well, Danielle, how can you expect the NASDAQ to go higher if you have this lead weight that is Apple on it? Well, that's exactly why this is one of the most important charts to watch for next week. Because if you see Apple break down, especially below this $180 price point, you have to know that that is going to drag the NASDAQ lower. And you do have to know as well that while Nvidia is exciting and everything else, the upside move isn't going to last forever, right? That momentum is going to wane. We are going to see a pullback. That always happens after you make a new high. And if Apple is kind of the domino that starts the fall, don't be surprised, because if Apple breaks below 180, probably going to see a trade down into 175. I don't know about 170. That would be quite a bit lower, but certainly possible on a break of the support zone. So definitely keep an eye out for Apple to the downside, and Tesla as well. Tesla is also a relative strength loser in this space right now. Tesla has gapped down after the earnings report and just has not been able to recover. It tried to recover. It's rallied up into these resistance zones, but it hasn't been able to get up through 200 and stay above there. I thought we were at least going to be able to get a gap fill on Tesla to 210. That has not been the case. And guess what? Now we have a daily squeeze. We have this momentum. It's consolidating here. It's getting ready to break out. And that breakout is generally going to occur in the direction of the trend. So that's why I need my tool. I need to use stock charts so I can see my squeeze right there, because that tells me that this thing is getting ready to go. Now, where could it go to? Well, definitely the previous low. It's going to be around 170, but I'd say 175. So looking at Apple and Tesla to the downside, Microsoft and Nvidia to the upside, that just brings you to a spot where you're looking at the market and saying, okay, well, how much higher can it go? Yes, I'm bullish on the NASDAQ. Yes, I do think it can go higher, but I also think that we have to be cautious here, because we're just in this spot where you have some potential, what do I even want to call them? They're like the black sheep of the family that's creating a situation where it can kind of taint the whole NASDAQ here. Let me give you one more to the upside, because I think that this one, it's a little dicey because it's a little risky, but this again has a daily squeeze. So looking at the squeeze, this is AMD. And I want to point this out too. So here's a daily chart, right? So you can see that AMD has been trading sideways for a while. When you are a squeeze trader and you're a momentum trader like me, you always want to make sure you're looking for relative strength names to the upside, relative weakness names to the downside. And when you have a situation where a stock is kind of trading back and forth, it's always going to be a little interesting, because for me, like, I'm in the media all the time. They're always asking me about which tickers are moving. And that's great. I can comment on those and trade them after the fact. But when you are a trader and you're sitting here by yourself and you're looking for opportunities, you want to look for the ones that nobody's looking at, nobody's talking about, because they're going back and forth and they're doing nothing. Because you know why? That means that they're building up energy and they're about to go. You want to get into it, before it really takes off. Now, you might say, well, Danielle, it's down 3%. What do you mean? Like, it is taking off. Yeah, that's true, but it's still been trading in like a relatively tight range. Now, if you look at especially the weekly chart, what you're going to see here on this weekly chart is that AMD in this recent breakout came when there was a major squeeze. So you can see there's a major squeeze right here. And people are looking at it like, oh, AMD is not doing that great. It's trading lower, it's consolidating, and then boom. So that's why you want to trade the squeeze. That's why when something's, choppy, it's going back and forth, and you're just not really sure, you have to look at your signals, because that is what's going to tell us, that this thing is getting ready for a move. So I think it's going to trade up into 200. I don't know that it's going to be immediately, just because what will happen is when you're in a squeeze, it can consolidate for a couple weeks. But that's why I have my long stock positions. That's also why I'm going to look at entering some options trades with a target of about $200 a share. Because I think ultimately this thing is going to break out to the upside. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions. You can follow me on YouTube. This is my YouTube channel. Just made this recently. It's Trader Danielle, Danielle. You can see that there. Follow me there. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, great rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next time.